Last week, there was no minor league news and brews, but it was more of the no brews section of it, as there was a little bit of a crossover between Bucks in the Basement and minor league news and brews, having Joe Doyle back for the fifth year in a row at Joe Doyle MILB to preview the draft. So that kind of goes into the minor league portion just a little bit. The week before that, on the Bucks in the Basement feed, had some guys on at First on Fish, and also at James Fox from at Future Sox to talk about some trade rumors that were out there. And as these trade rumors pick up steam from time to time, don't really know if the Pirates are buyers or sellers at this point in time. As I am recording this, the Pirates and Mitch Keller just took down the Mets to split the series, moving to 43 and 47. 4 games back of the wild card, could be 4.5, depending on what happens with the San Diego Padres. But realistically, there are still a bunch of teams that are just kind of like hanging around the wild card race, and your Pittsburgh Pirates are one of those. But the one thing that I hear the most when these trade discussions come out, especially on the buyer's end, is the term untouchable. And I really don't like to use the term untouchable when it comes to a prospect, and even sometimes with major league players. I mean, obviously, Paul Skeens and Jared Jones would be in the quote-unquote untouchable realm, a Brian Reynolds, a Mitch Keller, but it's not a term that I throw around as much as I've seen it thrown around in Pirate social media, mostly from fans. I definitely have seen it a little bit with some of the Pittsburgh sports media. And when they're talking about untouchables, there are like 3 trains of thought or phrases that usually kind of go into those discussions and into that terminology. And it's number 1, they want to get a good return, but don't want to give up too much. They want to win the trade now and in the future. And finally, the classic, we will trade all of our bad players for your good players. And when I had those discussions, especially with James Fox, when we were talking about a return for a Luis Robert, the thing that struck me was James saying, I'm not really sure if the Pirates have enough. There were some good pieces, but there really wasn't a headliner that you would really see in that type of trade. A player of that caliber, when healthy, with the years of control that they have. And it really got me thinking. So I went back and I looked at the Pirates farm system rankings according to Fangraphs, starting when Ben Cherington took over. And this was following the trade of Starling Marte for Liover Peguero and Brennan Malone. They came in at 4th in the Fangraphs rankings. Some more trades, a little bit of drafts going on in there, and then in 2021, they're number 3. 2022, they stay at number 3. 2023, they drop back to 10th. And then in 2024, they're at eighth. And a lot of that has to do with Paul Skeens and Jared Jones. Because when I look at, how they value these players, and, there's a great book called Future Value that you probably should go out and read if you haven't read it yet. But it's talking about the future value of players on that scouting scale of 20 to 80. And like the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, uh, with Paul Skeens graduating, the Pirates really won't have any of those guys. And I looked at really the depth of the farm system, and the Pirates had 15 players that had a future value of 40, which, according to Fangraphs, would work out to be a player that they would project to be a bench player as far as a position player, and then a back end starter, and that would almost be like maybe even a reliever as far as the pitching side of things go. And yeah, I mean, it's good to have those types of players, but when that is where the majority of your value comes from in a farm system, it doesn't really give, much weight to a trade that would bring back these impact, bats that many people are talking about. And it's not to make an excuse, for Ben Cherington, for Bob Nutting, for Travis Williams, whoever you want to, think that I am kind of letting off the hook. But that's where, like, when a team is looking to trade an impact bat, and the same, with the Pirates, if you would be looking to trade, somebody, you want to get that return. You do want to win the trade, or at least feel like you won the trade on paper. But for me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the Pirates would be able to do that, especially for a player that I would like them to look for, which would be somebody who would be a rental, somebody beyond a rental, somebody that would be beyond a player that they would just get a few months out of. At least one more year of control in there where you can see, what you have with them and that they can contribute at least at the beginning of the next season. And the Pirates really only have what I would see as maybe one guy at this point in time that kind of falls into that. And James Fox kind of said that he didn't believe that, that player, and that would be Bubba Chandler, who is currently in, Double A, has performed well as of late since coming back off the IL. But even that being a headliner, even throwing another guy that would probably be in that upper tier of the players that we would be able to trade, in Tamar Johnson, who once again a guy who has kind of caught fire since the beginning of June. But I don't know, like, and you can't just start to throw a decent amount of guys in there and start stacking that stuff to be able to say, okay, they're going to get back a lot of players and, kind of see the chips fall where they may, because as Pirates fans, we really wouldn't want Ben Cherington to be doing that if, say, the Pirates unfortunately had, experienced some of the stuff, or, I mean, they possibly still could at some point in time, experience the downfall that the Chicago White Sox have had in their rebuild, having over 60 losses at this point in time during the season. I don't think you would be too happy if, you just got like 6 or 7 guys in a return for, what is seen as a potential marquee player. That's not something that would really fit really any type of rebuild where you have only a certain number of players to trade and you could use maybe some of the lesser, valued players to be able to go out and maybe get, a couple lottery tickets for them and build that way when you really want to hit on a trade for a marquee player. And I look down at even, a couple guys that maybe had a little bit more value before this season started. Um, and one, if you could have traded him possibly earlier. So this one really wouldn't be before the season started, but this would be like in a Braxton Ashcraft off of the 7-day IL, pitched 3 innings in his first outing for the Indianapolis Indians. And I really don't, see how, I wouldn't see that there would be a ton of, if you're trading him, um, you would be looking for, players that wouldn't have that caliber. When I talked to, Fish on First, it was talking about maybe getting a player like a Brian De La Cruz. And it wasn't looking to get, a marquee player. And if you would be trading, Braxton Ashcraft, it would be, I feel like in some ways selling a little bit low because we've seen, what he can do this year. And even though there is that going to be that innings cap this year, it's a guy that I feel can easily contribute at some point in time, and hopefully for the majority of the season next year. The other one is Anthony Solomito, and Anthony Solomito has just really kind of regressed and taken a step back after coming up to Double A Altoona last year and kind of really performing really, really well for a young player, at that point in time, a 20-year-old player, but, getting put on like a developmental list just because the velocity isn't there. Something I've talked about with John Moses. If you go back and search Andrew Destin from the Post-Gazette and Anthony Solomito, you'll get a good article on there about him trying to, kind of build up his lower half to be able to make the velocity jump the way it had during last season. And then you have maybe a Mike Burrows who's coming back from Tommy John and could possibly contribute as, a part of the bullpen for the Pirates towards the end of the season, or maybe they just kind of work him back up and take the, Braxton Ashcraft approach of stretching him back out next year for some of that starter depth, because as you see, as a season progresses, it goes from thinking you don't have enough depth to thinking you have too much depth to now thinking again, do we have enough depth again? So realistically, there are, some players, but I would feel like a lot of them would be kind of maybe a little bit too far away. And some that have underperformed, and it's lumped into almost like a third tier. So in the first tier, you have, Bubba and Tamar. The second tier, in my eyes, you have an Ashcraft, a Solomito, a Burrows. And then there's just this big group of guys. Hunter Barco, who is, at the time of this recording, still in, high A Greensboro, and will have not the severe innings cap that he had last year in his first, half a season back from Tommy John, but in a first full season, he will have an innings cap. You have Xander Meath, who, is in the FCL and is extremely young. Sung Chae Chang, who has, as with Tamar, gotten a little bit hotter as, the weather has gotten hotter, but didn't take the step forward that we thought that we would see to begin this season. Mitch Jebb, still in, high A Greensboro. Jack Brannigan, still in high A Greensboro. And he, although he has that defensive, flexibility, there's been some injuries that have happened to him so far this season, and he hasn't really taken off the way that, we thought he would, and many of us thought he would, being in Greensboro, having some of that power. Really haven't seen that. And, another guy that gets thrown into kind of, at times jokingly, the untouchable category at this point in time is Charles McAdoo, who's made his way, up to Altoona. But I mean, even with that, and another guy that's in Altoona, and a Thomas Harrington, what kind of return do you think you would get for like a Thomas Harrington, Charles McAdoo package? None of those, for other teams, if you look throughout the minor leagues, I mean, a lot of these teams already have, a Thomas Harrington who is developed as a pitcher, not just a thrower, but, is performing, pretty well. And then, a Charles McAdoo who kind of comes from out of nowhere and performs better than, Tamar Johnson. And I know Tamar's younger, performs better than Mitch Jebb, who came from Michigan State, where, Charles McAdoo is coming from San Jose State. So people aren't, looking for him to outperform a player like that, but he has. But that's where I kind of go, like, I'm looking at it, and I'm glad you guys could, like, take a step inside my brain here for a little bit. I know it's a little bit of a scary place at times, but I just kind of wanted to talk through this a little bit because, I mean, I do see ways where we could, not give up a ton because we've kind of stockpiled, prospects who are in the FCL and in Bradenton, like a Kiner Delgado, an Esther Suero, a Johnny Severino. I mean, you have a Tony Blanco Jr. and players of that ilk that could get a return of, a rental that could help you, kind of get through the rest of the season and improve, hopefully, offensively. For some reason, Tommy Pham's name, keeps, popping into my head more and more that I think about it, a Pilar. But I don't really see a lot beyond that. And I know that's not going to move the needle enough for people, but it may be enough to move it to the point where, instead of being 4 games under 500 at this point in time, that we could at least get back up to, a 500 or maybe a couple games over by sneaking out some of these wins that, we really should have with the type of pitching that we had. But, I mean, anybody that's thinking there's going to be this, kind of giant splash that all of a sudden is just going to, flip the switch for this offense, I really, I mean, I hate to say it, like I've been saying this entire time, is that I just really don't think that we have the prospect capital as far as the high-end prospect capital that we had in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because of the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucks in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow at Shop Yins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins by a Yinzer. With a week off from the top 5 Pirates prospects and also the Brews, I was able to do a little bit more deep diving. And being that I had, the 4th of July, a trip to Treasure Lake, the yearly trip with my family to the lake, I had a little bit of time to get some brews under my belt as well. Here are the top 5 Pirates prospect performers over the past couple weeks, and really, for some of them, for the past month or so. Number 1, in no particular order, no surprise here, Bubba Chandler on the season, the 3.65 ERA, the 3.24 FIP, over 62 and 2/3 innings, 75 strikeouts, 22 walks, a 1.04 whip. And if you look at the time since he has come back from the IL, that funny bone injury surgery that he sometimes gets the forearm tightness from, he has a 2.19 ERA, a 2.48 FIP over 37 innings pitched, 45 Ks, only 4 walks, good for a 0.76 whip. Number 2, another guy that I talked about in the last segment, Thomas Harrington. On the season, a 2.56 ERA, a 3.02 FIP, over 52 and 2/3 innings, 51 Ks, only 7 walks, a 1.03 whip. His most recent start on the 4th of July, 7 innings pitched, 3 hits, no earned runs, 2 walks, and 6 Ks. And just a reminder, Thomas Harrington did start the year on the IL, was dealing with a little bit of a shoulder issue during spring training. So he's been working back up and only been getting better and better. Speaking of getting better, number 3, Po Yu Chen. The overall numbers do not look great or eye-popping in any way, shape, or form. A 4.12 ERA, a 4.80 FIP, over 83 innings pitched, 56 Ks. This guy is not a strikeout pitcher, but 30 walks, a 1.30 whip. However, since June 1st, you got to 2.68 ERA, a 3.89 FIP over 43 and 2/3 innings, 37 Ks. Is having a little bit of a walk issue still, a little bit, not as much as before. 14 free passes, good for a 1.10 whip. Really like to see that. Number 4, Patrick Riley down in Greensboro. A 3.50 ERA, a 4.41 FIP, 72 innings pitched, 91 Ks. 38 walks, a little bit of control issues, good for a 1.22 whip. Just like Po Yu Chen, since June 1st, the FIP is not great, so you could possibly and probably see a little bit of a negative regression here. The 3.78 FIP with the 1.76 ERA, 30 innings pitched, 34 Ks, 14 walks, a 1.14 whip. And finally, this is a pitcher-heavy episode. Wanted to mention this guy, Inmer Lobo. Inmer is 20 years old, a left-handed reliever from Venezuela, and people are wondering, where do we get Lobo from? Well, it was in the Hoy Park trade to the Boston Red Sox back on 11/23/22. Pirates legend Hoy Park got us Lobo. Lobo has 0 earned runs over his last 7 appearances across the FCL and Low A Bradenton. Good for a 0.88 whip, 11.1 innings pitched, 15 Ks, only 2 walks, has been used in some, long relief also, trying to get some saves in there. So Lobo, only 20 years old. That, guys and gals, is your top 5, are your top 5 Pirates prospects for the past couple of weeks and beyond.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer, let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
I took a break from packing the family up, all the fishing poles, all of the vests, all of the floating devices that we had to go up to the lake. Took a break and went down to Caliente Pizza and Draft House and got a chance to sample some of the beers from the new Dough Daddy Brewing. The first one I had was their Hoppin' Daddy, a pale ale, an American pale ale, coming in at 4.6% ABV. Give that one a 425, knock it down to 375, and then their signature Hazy Dough Daisy IPA, a New England style IPA, coming in at 5.9%. Give that one a 400, knock it down to 350. Then, when I was sitting around the lake, I went to the little convenience store they have in Treasure Lake, picked up a 6-pack of the Appalachian Brewing Company Hop Offering Session IPA, 4.8%. Give that one a 450, knock it down to 400. And as always, whenever I see a new lime-flavored beer, pick it up for the wife. She loves the lime-flavored beers. I tried one myself from New Trail Brewing Company, their Crisp Lime, coming in at 4.8%, the same as the Hop Offering. Give that one a 350. I'm going to knock that up to 375 because really, if I have more than one of those lime beers, it starts to hurt my stomach a little bit. Any of the flavored beers seem to do that nowadays. And then finally, on the 4th of July, I was given an Armed Forces Brewing Company Death from Above Coffee Porter while I was grilling. Give that one a 375. And I'm not a big porter fan. I'm not a big stout fan. Cool concept, good cause. So for this one here, give it a 375. I'm knocking it the whole way up to 450. And until next time, everyone, let's go Indians. Let's go Curve. Let's go Hoppers. Let's go Marauders. And let's go FCL and DSL Pirates.